What we really want to do is bring this in front of a federal court judge and say, listen, we think taxpayers, the listeners of this podcast, have a right to access this information, and we're going to make sure that we're well equipped with everything we need to give the judge, the full story such that they can make that decision meaningfully for taxpayers.
This is the Canadian Taxpayers Federation podcast, where we are fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. I'm Chris Sims. I'm the Alberta director here for the CTF. I'm here with my friend Devin Drover. Now, Devin is a man of many skills. He is our Atlantic director, which means I think you've got like 18 provinces out there or something, Devin?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, he's got to write, budget reviews for all those provinces. He's got a lot going on. He's also our in-house lawyer. I think, what is the technical term? You're something counsel?
General counsel.
That sounds fancy, and it is. That means that he's a real lawyer and he works for us, which is super awesome. Which brings us to the point of this special podcast episode, and that is the state broadcaster. Yes, the CBC. We have got government-funded media coming out the wazoo here in Canada, unfortunately. And the one leading that parade, of course, is the CBC. Now, we all know that they take about $1.4 billion from us this year. We know they're getting in line for even more taxpayers' money being given to them. But I wanted to zero in with what Devin is doing right now, because we're fighting this on so many fronts, Devin. And I think sometimes our listeners and supporters may not realize all of the work that you, are doing when it comes to legal fights.
Mm-hmm.
Bring us up to speed on our current legal fight that we're having with the CBC, please.
Absolutely. So, to back up a little bit, here at the CTF, as our listeners will no doubt be aware, we regularly file access information requests. These are, requests you file under laws in Canada. Every province and the federal government has an access to information or freedom of information law that allows citizens to request information from government. And, the government receives the request and in almost all cases is required to process the request unless it's, falls into a small set of narrow exemptions. So, for example, you can't request people's personal phone numbers or things like that would violate their privacy, things like that. Here at the CTF, we often use access information laws to get information about how governments and government agencies like the CBC is spending taxpayer money. It's through access information requests like this, for example, that we broke the huge cost of bonuses being given to CBC executives, which has been a huge topic for us and something that has been clearly to interest of a lot of our supporters. And one of the requests we filed, similar to the bonus story, was asking how much the CBC is spending on advertising every year for the last 5 years. So this isn't, we're not asking how much do they spend on this billboard or how much is broken down for program. We've asked for the aggregate costs. So all the money that the CBC has spent for a given year on advertising. Instead of telling us, they've denied the request, which means taxpayers are now left in the dark. They've suggested that disclosing the aggregate amount, that is how much they're spending across all forms of media as one bulk number, would cause them economic harm, which is a discretionary example under access information law. And what I mean by discretionary is it's not a required exemption. They could waive that and use the discretion to disclose the information, even if it would cause them any form of economic harm. But first, we don't buy them that it causes them any economic harm. We're not asking how much they're bidding on a certain contract or sponsoring the Juno Awards or the Olympics. We're just asking for the total dollar amount they spent amongst everything. Revealing it, in our view, will cause no harm to the CBC. But secondly, even if it does, Canadian taxpayers have a right to know how their money is being spent. The Court of Appeal here in my home province of Newfoundland and Labrador has recognized that. Other provinces have recognized that. CBC shouldn't be trying to hide behind exemptions to keep taxpayers in the dark. So that's really what this case is about. If CBC wants to take money from taxpayers, they should be transparent on how taxpayer funds are being treated. And lastly, the other crucial part of this lawsuit is by not providing us this information, they're violating the freedom of expression rights protected in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms to scrutinize government activity. If Canadians aren't given information from government, how can we scrutinize what they're doing and know if we're getting good value for our money, if if friends or family of government officials are getting kickbacks? All of these things are required. All of this information is required for, organizations like the CTF or individuals to be able to scrutinize government. So that's really what we're doing with this case is we're taking the CBC to court to get aggregate advertising costs. This may not be a smoking gun. We may get this information and it may not be particularly huge. It might not be a huge expense, but it may be. And all of this, it comes to the fundamental principle that all taxpayers have a right to know how their money is being spent. And that's why we're taking the CBC to court.
I think that's the fundamental, knee-jerk reaction I have when I'm listening to this case is this is not some private company that is, I don't know, selling rubber boots somewhere that isn't taking taxpayers' money. Like, we wouldn't care. Go ahead and do your thing. Sell your rubber boots. No, this is government funded media. They take $1.4 billion per year from us. To put that into perspective, because a billion is hard to grok, 1.4 billion, that would cover the full-time salaries of about 7,000 cops plus 7,000 paramedics. And if you don't want to picture those, imagine 7,000 carpenters plus 7,000 plumbers. Like, that is the amount of money that taxpayers are forced to give to the CBC. And for them to, clutch their pearls and say, oh, my goodness, this is all private information. No, it's not. It is not, because this is taxpayers' money. So I'm really glad that you're in that pit fighting for us. Speaking of the pit that you were fighting in, you were in Ottawa recently.
Yes.
Bring us up to speed. Paint us a little picture. Because, like, not many people are, in-house counsel. Not many people, go through something like this. Like, were you at the Supreme Court building and did you have a wig on your head? Were you, like, brandishing a cod? Like, what was this?
Yeah, so I think it's before I came on board with the CTF, I worked for a law firm here in St. John's, and what I'd often tell individuals, they really normally only see a lawyer for the normal person, if they're lucky, will only see a lawyer twice in their life, normally to buy a house and to do their wills or estate planning near the end of their life. That is the ideal for a Canadian citizen to not have to spend a bunch of time and money with a bunch of stuffy lawyers. Hopefully, I'm not too stuffy as one,
You're
but
not. I've
um,
seen him. Go ahead.
but the legal process is confusing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like and what I did yesterday and kind of how this all happens. So um, the matter is being heard in federal court. By that, it means there's two levels of court, like there are levels of government. You have got provincial courts, which, involve matters that happen within a province, certain criminal matters, certain, civil suits. And then there's the federal court, which considers a lot of activity at the federal level, predominantly immigration cases, and in our case, a lot of constitutional law and access information cases. So what happened yesterday is, after we filed a notice of application, which is basically the CBC told us they wouldn't provide us the information. So we filed in Ottawa with the federal court an application asking for the court to review this decision. We then, as part of that process, had to file an affidavit. So an affidavit lays out our evidence of what happened. And our affiant was Ryan Thorpe, our investigative journalist who's now moved on to other things, but is still very much a part of the CTF family. So he was our affiant for this matter, laying out the facts. He filed this request. They denied this request. This is why the request is important to him as a journalist and the CTF is an advocacy organization. And then as well, CBC has to file in response to that an affidavit. So they have their own witness, which was a marketing executive. That was the steps that got us to yesterday. So yesterday we were in a boardroom in downtown Ottawa, just a few minutes from Parliament Hill, in which we were there with a court reporter, and it provides an opportunity for us as CTF lawyers to ask questions of the CBC executive, including why they think this information shouldn't be disclosed to taxpayers. And as well, it provided an opportunity for the CBC's lawyer to ask questions of our good friend Ryan. So that was the process yesterday. So, the whole legal process is strange and weird if you're not used to it. But, essentially yesterday was just both sides trying to cross-examine is the technical term to get information and kind of paint the full picture so that we can do what's next to bring this matter to court, which is what we're really concerned about. What we really want to do is bring this in front of a federal court judge and say, listen, we think taxpayers, the listeners of this podcast, have a right to access this information, and we're going to make sure that we're well equipped with everything we need to give the judge, the full story, such that they can make that decision meaningfully for taxpayers.
Yeah, this is all super important again because it's our money. Like, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is not applicable, but for example, if I'm sitting there watching a hockey game, for example, that is not on CBC, or I'm watching some other event, and I see like umpteen ads come across for, hey, download the CBC app, whatever gem or whatever it's called. Do this, do this, do this, and it's an ad. Is that the kind of would that be within the big pot of aggregate like advertising money that we're asking for?
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of record that we're looking for here is
Okay.
what is the total? And I mean, you don't need to go very far to see CBC ads. You see them on different cable stations. You see them in
Hmm.
newspapers or magazines advertising for certain programs. You certainly see them on Facebook. You can go to Facebook, actually has a what's called the meta library. So it shows all the ads that different pages are running. And you can actually go in and see what the CBC is already spending on digital ads, or a rough estimate of that. So some of this information is already out there. So that's part of the reason we don't see this as a compelling argument from the CBC that it's going to cause them harm. But again, it doesn't matter if you're
Yeah.
spending taxpayer money. Canadians deserve to know how that money is being spent, and that's why I'm very passionate about this case.
No, it's a big deal. And for folks who are trying to remember Ryan Thorpe, he was the mild-mannered gentleman that was sitting next to me. He was my wingman during the committee hearing, and he did very well while he was there. Now, and he is a longtime investigative journalist, and he feels very passionately about a free press. And as a lifelong journalist myself, so do I. I'll put it this way. A free press does not mean you have a bunch of free rolled up newspapers that you're handing out at Times Square. It is free from the state, free from government interference and influence. And guess what? If you're taking $1.4 billion from the government, that's not a free press. Ryan feels so strongly about this that he actually has the dash 30 dash tattoo on his arm, which is an old signal at the end of your copy if you're a newspaper reporter. So he's very serious about this. Now, why was he called there? Did he have to be cross-examined because he was the person who physically sent in the Freedom of Information requests?
Yeah, so he was our affiant, so he was our witness. He was the one
Okay.
that sent in the request itself, as well. He was kind of our representative in this court case on, he was the one closest to the request itself, and he's also the one that would have wrote the story if we received this information. He would have been the person to write a story and inform our readers and our listeners on taxpayer.com on what the results of this access information request was there. He did a great job in cross-examination. I'm always very proud of the work that he has done for us and the work he continues to do in his new role. But yeah, so that was what yesterday overall was about, which leads us now to what's next.
Yeah, for sure. Very quickly though, how long were you in there for? Like once you guys got sat down, like
Uh,
about how long did it take? And is there any other detail you can provide from it of what you guys
I
actually said?
I have to be a little careful
Okay.
because there might be. It wouldn't surprise me if we have a listener at the CBC after this trying to find out what's going on in the brain of mine, and I don't want to reveal too much. But we're there for a few hours. It's a very formal process in terms of you're in a big boardroom. You've got a court recorder or reporter there tracking, basically preparing a transcript of what's being discussed. We'll get a copy of that in the lead up to our preparation for the actual hearing. So yeah, very interesting process. Look forward to going to court in it very soon and talking. They were making the argument to the judge on why we deserve this information, why Canadians deserve this information, and then after that, being able to share the results with all our listeners here on YouTube and everywhere else.
I find this so neat. Okay. All right. Going forward, what's the next steps in the fight to get our information that we should be able to have from the CBC?
Yeah, so there's kind of the formal steps. So by July 7th, I need to have our what's called a written our motion record or full application record. So that includes, all of our legal arguments, all the cases I'm going to cite from authorities across Canada on why, we're entitled to this information, why Canadians are entitled to this information. The lawyers for the CBC will then have about, I think, 21 days to respond. So July 28th, they have to provide their written record. And then after that, we're off to the races. So as soon as we get the report from the CBC, we'll be able to file a document with the court asking for a hearing date. We're going to have wide open availability to get this heard as quick as possible. So we're hoping to have this matter heard this fall, and then hopefully I'll have positive news to report after that on what comes of it and when we're going to receive this information.
So fall? We could be doing this in fall?
We could be doing this in fall. The federal court is being very quick.
Yeah.
I know for some of our matters with the capital gains lawsuit that I've talked about on other episodes of this podcast, we've got a court date coming up in that one very soon, and I'm going to be sharing that in another video this week. So I don't want to
Don't scoop yourself.
I don't want to scoop myself yet, but things tend to move pretty quick in federal court compared to some of the stuff we have in provincial courts. I know here in Newfoundland and Labrador, we're intervening a case involving the challenge the province of Newfoundland and Labrador is doing for the equalization formula. That one, it's taken us just a year to get an hour-long court appearance. So it's crazy what's happening in some of these provinces in terms of the slow justice system, which is another issue the taxpayers should be raising with their members of their provincial parliaments or provincial assemblies, because we can only protect our property rights as much as we can enforce them. So ensuring taxpayers should always be cautious in making sure the justice system is effective and is working for them. But all that to say, we are hoping to have this heard this fall, and then hopefully I'll have good news to report back to all our listeners on that information.
Devin, anything I haven't asked you yet that you need to get out there?
No, I'm just so excited about this case, so excited for the support we're having from taxpayers across this country.
Yeah, big time. Folks, this is the real deal, okay? It's we start with the bumper stickers, we go to the t-shirts, and then we sick Devin on them in court, okay? So this is how the Taxpayers Federation fights, okay? We just gang pile something until we actually get the results that we need. So if you believe in a free press, if you don't think that media should be funded by the government, or at the very least, if you think that a government-funded media company that takes more than $1 billion from you every year should at least tell you where they're spending their advertising money, or just the full amount, that you have the right to that information, you're right. Head over to our website. This is how you sign up for the Taxpayer Army. Join the fight to get transparency out of the CBC. Sign the petition to defund the CBC, and then you will get all of Devin's updates the moment they happen. Thank you so much for listening.